Hey everyone, welcome back to Love Wins, where the truth matters because it's the truth that sets us free. All right, we are back for our third in our series on not when the Sabbath is, but what the Sabbath is, and this one it's my favorite. I love the last one that we did because it's a story, and I believe stories are powerful and you can remember them. But this explains what our problem is, and it explains what the solution is. And anyone can grasp it. And when you do, your life will never be the same. If you don't, you'll continue on as you are. So I hope you're in the first group, not in the second. Hebrews chapter 4. By the way, the book of Hebrews, we'll get into it someday. If you remember the word better, you've grasped the book of Hebrews, because Hebrews shows how in our human history, we have failed, people have failed, priests have failed, prophets have failed, everybody's failed, but Jesus is better. He's the better priest, he's the better Messiah, he's just better. All right, so it connects Israelite history with Jesus and shows how he's the one. Hebrews 4. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest. Notice the connection between promise and rest. You cannot separate them. If you separate them, you won't have rest. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to come short of it. So it's possible to miss this. Don't miss it. For indeed the gospel, the good news, was preached or proclaimed to us as well as to them. So author speaking to the present day people of his time and looking back to the people who have come before. They heard it, we've heard it, but the word which they heard in the past, it did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. So they heard the good news, they just didn't believe it. Verse 3. For we who have believed do enter that rest. As he has said in the past, so I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. So God would get frustrated with them and say, they're never going to enter my rest. He's not angry at them. He's not cursing them. He's angry at the fact of, there's nothing more I can do. And they're not getting it, and they're not wanting it, and they're not embracing it. And then the rest of the verse says this. Although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. Now, there are people in Christianity who argue, was everything finished when Jesus died on the cross? Is there more that he has to finish? And that's a huge argument in some circles. This says it was all finished before the foundation of the world. How can that be? Verse 4. For he has spoken. That's the answer, but we'll continue. For he has spoken in a certain place of the seventh day in this way. And God rested on the seventh day from all his works. And again in this place, they shall not enter my rest. God rested because he was finished. We won't enter his rest. The only way that we cannot enter his rest is by not believing that his work is finished. You understand how those two go hand in hand? Either we believe that everything he said he would do is done, or we don't believe that. And if we don't believe that, then we're scrambling to try and make it up for what he hasn't done. And in that, there is no rest. I'm going to try and make this practical and simple for you before the end. Verse 6. Since therefore it remains that some must enter it, and those to whom it was first preached did not enter because of, and some translations here will say disobedience, and some translations will say unfaithfulness, and there might be other translations that use other words, but here's the literal Greek word. We don't even have a word for it in English. At least we don't use it like we could or should. But the Greek word here, the Greek idea is because of their unpersuadableness. They heard it, but they couldn't be persuaded of it. Verse 7. Again, he designates a certain day, saying in David, today. After such a long time as it has been said, today. If you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. In other words, if you hear the truth about what God has done and that it's finished, don't harden yourself against that truth, as many of us tend to do. Verse 8. For if Joshua, who took over from Moses, had given them rest back in the wilderness when they went into the promised land, if Joshua had accomplished that, then he would not afterward have spoken of another day. You see, Joshua leading them across the Jordan from the wilderness into the land of Canaan did not change anything, because the change that needs to happen here and here. There's nothing externally that God can do. He can do miracle after miracle. He can change our circumstances in 1,000 ways, 1,000 times. But if we don't get it settled in our head and in our heart that he is a good God, that he knows what he's doing, and that everything that needs to be done has already been done, we will never have rest. 9. There remains therefore a rest for the people of God. Listen to me. When he wrote this, when this was written, there was no controversy between Saturday and Sunday. There was no controversy about which day was the day. Everybody was worshiping still on the seventh day, but they had no rest. Rest does not come from getting the day of the week right. Rest comes from believing the author of the day, the author of our existence, the author of our past, present, and future. Rest comes when we take him at his word. Verse 10, this is the nail that seals the deal. It's the last verse we're going to read today. For he who has entered his rest, for she who has entered his rest, for anyone who has entered his rest has himself or herself also ceased from his or her works, as God did from his. When you take God at his word, you will not find yourself gathering double on and keeping it till the next day on the first day of the week, because he said you don't need to do that. When you take him at his word and you trust him, you will take double on Friday and you will rest on Sabbath. You will sleep in and enjoy the fact you don't have to go out and gather, because he said what you kept yesterday will be just as fresh as it was yesterday. When you take him at his word, you will rest in the fact that whatever is necessary to get us from Eden lost to Eden restored, from the hell that we're in to the heaven that awaits, if you take him at his word, you will never worry again. Because he said he'll get you there, and that everything that's needed to get you there is already done. You say, well, how can that be? As soon as you ask the question, how can that be, and you start scratching your head and you start making charts and figures, you've missed it. The secret is, what has God said? That's the secret. If Adam and Eve had simply listened to what God said, instead of looking at the tree and evaluating the tree for what it looked like, if they had just listened to what he said, they never would have eaten from it to begin with, and we wouldn't even have to be in this mess, having this conversation. We wouldn't know anything about the pain of sin and evil and law. We wouldn't know any of it. But they didn't take him at his word. They just didn't. They didn't. You see, God said his son would come. And he did. But the fact that he said it, it was done. As soon as God speaks anything, whatever he speaks, it's done. Because God never fails. God never misses. God never messes up. If he speaks it, it's accomplished. Whether it's accomplished today, tomorrow, or 1,000 years from now, at the moment he speaks it, it's done. He, she who has entered his rest, those who actually experience the rest. He, she who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works, as God did from his. When God was creating first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, animals and people on the sixth day, when he was done, he was done. And he rested the next day because there was nothing more to be done. It was finished. He rested. Let's make it practical. After you've written the exam, you don't study for the exam. It's over. After you've cooked the meal, you don't prepare the meal. It's over. When something is done, you rest from whatever that thing is. I have started to plant my garden. I have more garden to plant, but when I'm done planting, I will be able to rest from that thing because it's finished. Man, do I wish with every fiber of my being that we would settle it in our heads and in our hearts that everything necessary to get us from this hell to home is finished. These questions of whether you're good enough, whether you've done enough, whether you are enough, they're all answered by one phrase. It's finished. You can rest. It's finished. Whatever you can think of that needs to be done, it's already been done. It's either been done in literal reality or it's been done in future reality, spoken by him. It's him. He said it. It's over. When he said it will be rotten tomorrow, it will be because he said it. When he said it won't rot tomorrow, it didn't because he said it. Whatever he says is the way it will be. For he, she who has entered his rest has himself, herself ceased from trying to save themselves, just as God rested from his work. Once you get it, once I get it, once we get it, that God has done it, what do I need to do? And I can already hear the people in my head, but. If you have a but, take it to Jesus. Because I have shown you from the scriptures, you can rest. Your preacher might tell you can't. Your mama might tell you can't. Your daddy might tell you can't. Your conscience might tell you can't. The devil might tell you can't. But God says you can. Not only can you, but you must. You must come to the place where you lay it all down and say, God, I believe you. I believe you. Help my unbelief. We'll see you next time.